There was a moment, just one fleeting moment on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, when everything could have changed for Ethan Carter. He was sitting at his cluttered desk, staring at a blank notebook page, pen hovering in the air like a hummingbird uncertain where to land. Outside his window, the autumn leaves were falling one by one, each taking its own quiet journey to the ground. He watched them, mesmerized, and in that watching, he missed the moment. Again, just like he'd missed 1,000 moments before. You see, Ethan was drowning in dreams that were too big to hold, too bright to look at directly, and somehow, impossibly heavy for someone who never actually carried them anywhere. This is his story. But more than that, it's a story about the invisible architecture that builds the life you'll wake up to 10 years from now. Ethan lived in one of those small American towns where everyone knows your name, and that can feel like both a warm blanket and a cage depending on the day. Maplewood, they called it, the kind of place where the high school football games still drew crowds on Friday nights, where the diner on Main Street had been serving the same apple pie for 40 years, and where dreams, if you weren't careful, could quietly fade into the wallpaper of routine. Ethan wasn't special, at least not in the ways that get you noticed. He wasn't the athlete, wasn't the valedictorian, wasn't the kid with the obvious gift that made adults nod knowingly and say, "That one's going places." He was the middle ground, the in-between, the kid who was smart enough to know he wanted more but scared enough to never reach for it. His bedroom told the whole story if you knew how to read it. A guitar with dusty strings leaning against the corner, last touched with enthusiasm 6 months ago. A stack of books on entrepreneurship borrowed from the library, bookmarks optimistically placed in the first 3 chapters, never to advance further. Running shoes that had seen exactly 1 week of morning jogs before being buried under a pile of clothes. His life was a museum of abandoned beginnings, each one a monument to the phrase that had become his personal anthem. "I'll start tomorrow." Tomorrow was his favorite day, you see, because tomorrow was always perfect. Tomorrow he'd wake up early. Tomorrow he'd read that book. Tomorrow he'd finally become the person he could see so clearly in his mind. But tomorrow had a funny way of turning into today. And today always felt too messy, too tired, too ordinary for the extraordinary changes he was waiting to make. His mother would knock on his door sometimes, in the early evening when the house was settling into that quiet space between dinner and darkness. "Ethan, honey," she'd say, her voice carrying that particular mixture of hope and worry that only mothers can master. "You've got so much potential. You just need to apply yourself." And his father, a man of fewer words but deeper silences, would catch his eye across the dinner table and simply shake his head, not in anger, but in a kind of sad recognition, as if he was watching his son make the same mistakes he'd made, walking the same circular path that leads nowhere. His teachers said similar things, dressed in different words. Ethan could do so much better if he just put in the effort. Ethan seems distracted, disengaged. Ethan is capable, but there was always a but. And Ethan heard these words, he really did, but they bounced off him like rain off a windshield, there for a moment and then gone, leaving no lasting mark. Because deep in his heart, Ethan believed something that was slowly poisoning his future. He believed that change happened in big moments, in dramatic transformations, in sudden bolts of lightning that reorganized your entire life in an instant. He was waiting for his movie moment, the montage where everything clicks, the scene where the music swells and suddenly he's different, better, successful. But life, real life, doesn't work that way. And Ethan was running out of time to learn that lesson. It was a Saturday in October when everything began to shift, though Ethan wouldn't understand that for a while. He was walking through the town square, hands in his pockets, kicking at leaves, feeling that familiar weight of wasted days pressing down on his shoulders. The farmer's market was in full swing, the smell of fresh bread and cinnamon mixing with the crisp autumn air. And there, at a small wooden table surrounded by jars of honey and bundles of herbs, sat an old man Ethan had never seen before. His name was Thomas Whitmore, though Ethan wouldn't learn that until later. Thomas had the kind of face that looked like it had smiled through storms, eyes that seemed to see more than what was in front of them, and hands weathered by decades of work that meant something. Thomas looked up just as Ethan was passing, and their eyes met in that accidental way that sometimes feels like fate. "You look like a young man carrying a mountain," Thomas said, his voice gentle but clear, cutting through the market noise like a bell. Ethan stopped, surprised. Strangers didn't usually talk to him like that, like they could see inside him. "I'm just walking," Ethan replied, defensive. Thomas smiled, a knowing smile that made Ethan both uncomfortable and curious. "The heaviest mountains are the ones made of things we haven't done," Thomas said. "Sit with me for a moment." And maybe it was the way Thomas said it, without pressure, without judgment, or maybe Ethan was just tired of carrying that weight alone. But he sat down on the wooden bench across from the old man. "Do you know the difference between the people who change their lives and the people who don't?" Thomas asked, pouring 2 cups of apple cider from a thermos, the steam rising in the cool air. Ethan shook his head. "It's not talent," Thomas continued. "It's not luck. It's not even hard work, at least not the way most people think about hard work." He paused, taking a sip, letting the silence create space for what came next. "It's the smallest things, done consistently, that no one sees, that don't feel important in the moment, but that builds something underneath, something invisible but unshakable." Ethan wanted to dismiss this, wanted to think this was just another adult telling him what to do, but something in Thomas's voice held him there. "Let me tell you about a man I knew," Thomas said, settling back, his eyes taking on that distant look of memory. "This was years ago when I was about your age, feeling just as lost as you look right now. I met a farmer named Samuel. Samuel had bought a piece of land that everyone said was worthless. Rocky, poor soil, nothing would grow there. But Samuel had heard about a plant, a bamboo plant, that could grow in almost any condition if you were patient enough." Thomas paused, watching a family walk by with their children, the little ones clutching bags of kettle corn. Samuel planted Chinese bamboo seeds across his land. Every single day, he'd wake before sunrise and walk those fields, watering each section, caring for soil that looked dead. His neighbors mocked him. His own family questioned him. After 1 year, nothing. Not a single sprout. After 2 years, still nothing. The other farmers in the county planted corn, wheat, and within months they had crops, had money, had proof they'd made the right choice. But Samuel's land looked exactly the same as the day he started. Bare, empty, a fool's investment. Ethan found himself leaning forward, drawn into the story despite himself. 3 years passed, Thomas continued, his voice taking on a rhythm like a heartbeat. Then 4. Can you imagine? 4 years of waking up early, walking those fields, watering dirt that gave nothing back. 4 years of people whispering, of doubt creeping in during the dark hours of night, of wondering if you've wasted the best years of your life on something that will never come. But Samuel kept his routine. Every single morning, every single evening, small actions that felt meaningless in the moment, but he did them anyway. Thomas looked directly at Ethan now, his eyes intense. Then, in the 5th year, something miraculous happened. A shoot appeared. Just one, then another, then dozens, then hundreds. And once those bamboo plants started growing, do you know what happened? Ethan shook his head, completely absorbed now. In just 6 weeks, they grew 80 feet tall. 80 feet. The same land that had shown nothing for 4 years was suddenly a forest. Samuel's farm became one of the most successful in 3 counties. But here's what everyone missed, what everyone who heard that story forgot. The bamboo wasn't doing nothing for those 4 years. It was growing roots. Roots so deep and so strong that when it was time to rise, nothing could stop it. Thomas let that sit in the air between them, the market sounds fading into background music. "You see, Ethan," he said softly, and Ethan felt a chill hearing his name, realizing this old man somehow knew who he was. "You're waiting for the 6-week miracle, but you're not willing to do the 4 years of invisible work. You want the 80-foot bamboo, but you won't water the ground that looks empty. And because of that, you'll stay exactly where you are, dreaming but never growing. Ethan felt something crack open inside his chest, something that had been closed for a very long time. I don't know how to start, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I make plans, but they never stick. I try and then I stop. I'm not disciplined like other people. I'm not built that way. Thomas smiled again, but this time it was tinged with compassion. Nobody is built that way, son. Discipline isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, one small choice at a time. Let me ask you something. Can you do something small for just 2 minutes? Ethan frowned, confused. 2 minutes? Yeah, of course. Then that's where you start, Thomas said. Not with the big transformation, not with becoming a completely different person tomorrow. You start with something so small that you can't fail, something so tiny that your brain doesn't have time to talk you out of it. He pulled out a small, worn notebook from his coat pocket. I'm going to share with you what Samuel taught me all those years ago, the small habits that changed my life. But you have to promise me something. You won't try to do them all at once. You won't turn this into another grand plan that collapses under its own weight. You pick one, just one, and you do it for 30 days. Can you promise me that? Ethan nodded, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Actual hope, small and fragile but real. Thomas began to write, his handwriting shaky but clear. First, he said, reclaim your morning. Set your alarm just 30 minutes earlier. Not 2 hours, not some dramatic change. 30 minutes. And in those 30 minutes, don't check your phone. Don't scroll through the highlight reel of other people's lives. Just sit with yourself. Journal, stretch, watch the sunrise. Those 30 minutes over a year become 182 hours. That's almost 8 full days that most people sleep through. Imagine having 8 extra days each year. He continued writing. Second, feed your mind with intention. Read just 10 pages of something meaningful every day. Not social media, not random articles, but books that challenge you, that teach you, that make you think differently. 10 pages takes maybe 15 minutes, but over a year, that's 12 books. 12 different worlds, perspectives, ideas planted in your mind. Some people go years without finishing a single book. You'll have consumed 12. Thomas looked up, making sure Ethan was following. Third, break your big dreams into tiny actions. Want to write a book? Write 200 words a day. That's less than this conversation we're having right now. But 200 words a day becomes 73,000 words in a year. That's a book. Want to get in shape? Do 10 minutes of exercise at home. Just 10. Don't wait for the perfect gym membership or the perfect program. 10 minutes in your room every day. Your body doesn't know the difference between a home workout and a fancy gym. It only knows, did you move or didn't you? Ethan was writing now too in his phone, his fingers moving quickly to capture everything. Fourth, Thomas said, his voice taking on more urgency, learn to count backward. When you feel yourself about to postpone something, when that voice says, I'll do it later, you count. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you move. You move before your brain completes the excuse. You give yourself exactly 5 seconds before your mind can create a reason to wait. It sounds silly, but it's the difference between people who take action and people who think about taking action. Thomas turned to a fresh page. Fifth, and this one's important, practice gratitude like medicine. Every night before sleep, write down 3 specific things you're grateful for. Not big, vague things, specific moments. The way the sunlight came through your window, the text from a friend, the fact that you kept a promise to yourself. This rewires your brain from scanning for problems to scanning for gifts. It changes everything about how you see your life. He kept going, his voice steady and sure. Sixth, guard your attention like it's gold, because it is. Every time you pick up your phone, ask yourself, is this building my future or stealing it? Set boundaries. 1 hour of scrolling each day is 365 hours a year. That's 15 full days you've given to a screen. What if you took back just half of that? What could you build with 7.5 extra days? Thomas closed the notebook and looked at Ethan with an intensity that made the whole market seem to fade away. But here's the secret that nobody tells you. When you start these habits, nothing will happen. You'll wake up early and you'll still be the same person. You'll read 10 pages and you won't feel smarter. You'll exercise for 10 minutes and you won't see muscles in the mirror. And that's when most people quit. They don't see immediate results, so they assume it's not working. But those roots are growing, Ethan. Underground, invisible, but growing. Ethan felt tears prickling at the corner of his eyes, though he couldn't exactly say why. "What if I fail?" he asked. "What if I start and stop like I always do?" Thomas reached across the table and put his weathered hand on Ethan's. "Then you start again. The only real failure is believing that one missed day erases all the days you showed up. If you miss a day, you don't need perfection. You just need to not miss 2 days in a row. That's it. That's the whole secret. Just don't miss twice." The weeks that followed were some of the strangest of Ethan's life, because from the outside, nothing changed at all. He still lived in the same house, went to the same school, saw the same people. But something inside was shifting, quietly, like tectonic plates moving beneath the earth. He started with the morning just 30 minutes earlier. The first few days were brutal. His body screamed at him to stay in bed. His mind offered 1,000 logical reasons why sleep was more important. But he remembered Thomas's words about the bamboo, about roots growing in darkness, and he got up anyway. In those early mornings, with the house still asleep and the world muted and soft, Ethan discovered something he'd never known. He liked himself better in the quiet. Without the noise of the day, without the pressure of performance, he could hear his own thoughts clearly for the first time. He started journaling, just stream of consciousness, and was shocked by what came out. Dreams he'd forgotten he had, fears he'd never named, gratitude for things he'd taken for granted. The 10 pages of reading came next. He started with a book on psychology, then one on entrepreneurship, then a biography of someone who'd overcome impossible odds. And slowly, imperceptibly, his internal vocabulary began to change. He started thinking in new frameworks, seeing possibilities where before he'd only seen obstacles. The exercise felt silly at first, just 10 minutes in his bedroom, following YouTube videos. But he showed up every day, and after about 6 weeks he noticed something. He had more energy. His mood was more stable. His sleep was better. The habits were talking to each other, supporting each other, building something larger than their individual parts. The 5-second rule became his superpower. Whenever he felt resistance, he counted down and moved. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, start homework. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, reply to that email. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, have that difficult conversation. Action became automatic, faster than fear. The gratitude practice was the one he'd most doubted, but it became the one he cherished most. At night in his journal, he'd write 3 things, and over time, it changed how he moved through his day. He started noticing moments he would have missed before. The way his mom hummed while cooking, the perfect arc of a basketball swish, the feeling of finally understanding a complex concept in class. His life hadn't changed, but his experience of his life had transformed completely. 3 months in, something remarkable happened. His grades started improving, not dramatically at first, but consistently upward. Teachers noticed. His mom stopped knocking on his door with that worried voice. His dad caught his eye one morning when Ethan was up early, reading in the kitchen, and he just nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. But the biggest change was internal. Ethan started to trust himself again. Every day he kept his promises to himself. Every small habit he honored. It was like depositing coins in a bank account of self-respect. And that account was growing. By 6 months, people started asking him what had changed. Friends noticed he wasn't on social media as much, that he seemed more focused, more present. He'd lost some weight without trying, his skin looked clearer, his eyes brighter, but he couldn't explain it in a way that made sense. How do you tell someone that you're different because you wake up 30 minutes earlier? It sounds too simple, too small to matter, But the bamboo knows. The roots understand. By the end of his senior year, Ethan wasn't just a different student. He was a different person. He'd finished 8 books that year, written a novella that would never be published but proved to himself he could finish something, learned basic guitar again and actually stuck with it, and most importantly, built an unshakable foundation of self-discipline that didn't feel like discipline anymore. It just felt like who he was. Years later, Ethan would build a life that surprised everyone who'd known him as that distracted, undisciplined kid. He started a small business helping other young people find their path, built on everything Thomas had taught him that October day in the market. And whenever someone asked him the secret, he'd smile in a way that reminded people of a certain old man. And he'd say, "It's not about becoming a different person overnight. It's about becoming 1% better every single day, in ways so small that nobody notices, including you." Until one day, you look back, and you don't recognize the person you used to be. He'd tell them about the bamboo, about Samuel, about Thomas Whitmore, who he later learned had passed away the winter after their meeting, but whose words had planted seeds that were still growing. And he'd tell them the truth that nobody wants to hear but everyone needs to know. Your life tomorrow will be the sum of your tiny choices today. The scrolling or the reading, the sleeping in or the waking up, the starting or the postponing. The bamboo doesn't grow in the moment you can see it. It grows in the 4 years you can't. Your roots are growing right now, in this moment, based on what you choose to do next. So here's my question for you, the one Thomas would ask if he were here. What's the one small habit, so tiny you can't fail, that you'll commit to for the next 30 days? Not 10 habits, not a complete life transformation, just one. What will you choose? Because I promise you this, the version of yourself 1 year from now is being built right now, in the quiet moments, in the small choices, in the invisible architecture of your daily habits. And that future self is waiting, hoping, praying that today, finally, you'll plant the seed and start watering the ground. The bamboo is waiting to grow. The only question is, will you be the one patient enough to tend it?